There we go. Okay, so now I'll introduce our speakers. First, we're going to hear from Ralf Grünke. Ralf is from Germany. He lives just outside of Frankfurt, so he is the leader of our German chapter. Ralf has a PhD in political science. He is the author of 3 books and several articles, the latest, which is called Democracy in Troubled Times. He is a former city councilor and is also running for state parliament this fall. He serves on the leadership board of Friends of Earth, which is another nonprofit, I believe, right, Ralf? And he also works on the Interfaith Roundtable for his ward, so he's going to share a little bit more about that. He and his wife are the parents of 3 and the grandparents of 1. And then we have Graham. Graham lives in Scotland. And he, if I'm remembering correctly, lives in the very northernmost part of Scotland, as far north as you can get. Graham worked for 20 years in the fire service, English heritage, and in helping unemployed and disadvantaged individuals get to work. And then he decided to have a bit of a life change, and him and his family bought a small holding in northern Scotland. So there they grow their lots of their own food, fruits and vegetables. They raise cows, sheep, and pigs. And if any of you have looked at their Facebook group, you get to see some of the cool things that they have made and grown on their land. He now manages several hundred acres of the Scottish country estate without pesticides, which sounds like it's a cool opportunity and has allowed him to meet famous people such as King Charles. Him and his wife are the parents of 5 children, and they're the leaders of our UK chapter. So as you can see, they both have impressive resumes, and so it's a real treat to get to hear from them today. We'll let them speak, and then at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes or so of question and answer. So feel free to type your questions or comments in the chat. And then at the end, if you want to pop in and say something, you can do that too. So without further ado, Ralf, would you like to take it away?
Of course. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. If only my high school English teacher knew that I was giving a presentation in English tonight. My English skills, as James Weber, who was in attendance, could confirm, were mediocre at best. Before I served my mission in England, when it was my turn to give an oral presentation at secondary school, students from other classes would ask the teacher if they could sit in the back for the mere entertainment value of watching Ralf struggle to get out a few sentences in English. Then I was called as a missionary to England, mostly picked up British English without ever losing my German accent, obviously. But then I married an American, spent almost 4 years in the United States, and have been married to my lovely wife from Southern California ever since, for 27 years now. And as my friends from England say, what do they usually comment? They tell me, your English has been corrupted ever since. So today I just sound like a confused German who can't make up his mind between British and American English. Anyway, my presentation today doesn't have as much of a clear focus, but I'm describing a chain of events that ties in with the activities of the German chapter of Latter-day Saints Earth Stewardship, which, by the way, is called Treuhandschaft für die Erde. It's a fairly straightforward translation. Before I go through some of my slides, I want to give you what Germans would call the Großwetterlage, the general weather conditions, even though it has nothing to do with weather, but what we are experiencing as far as Earth stewardship is concerned, and also religiosity. Today, media, not just German media, but international media, are looking to Germany. There is a major protest at just about 20 miles west of Düsseldorf, in and around a small village called Lützerath. Maybe some of you have seen the headlines. Germany is about to destroy a village for a coal mine. There are about 10,000 protesters there. Greta Thunberg, who you've heard of, is also there, and it's a coalition of locals, climate activists, but also Christians of various faiths and denominations. At the same time, religiosity is on the decline. We don't have the statistics for 2022 yet, but the year before, in 2021, the Catholic Church in Germany lost 360,000 members. That's about the equivalent of the population of Colorado Springs. I looked it up. The Protestant Church lost about 280,000 members, equivalent to the population of Buffalo in New York. And for the very first time last year, a statistical milestone was reached, with fewer than 50% of Germans belonging to either the Protestant, that is the Lutheran, or the Catholic Church. This decrease of religiosity has created opportunities, though. The larger churches have been more active, more open to join interfaith roundtables, and my own church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been more inclined themselves to join an interfaith dialogue. The title of my presentation stems from a quote by Elder Orson F. Whitney, who said, "God is using more than one people for the accomplishment of his great and marvelous work. The Latter-day Saints cannot do it all. It is too vast, too arduous for any one people." And before I go into, as I told you, that I was going to talk about a chain of events before I even start talking about activities of our chapter, to give you a glimpse of what we've been doing the last few months and years. Let me just show you two examples of two boards. Actually, they're neighboring boards, each heavily involved in their interfaith roundtable, and their activities, which in two instances related to Earth stewardship. The interfaith, the Council of Religions in Frankfurt is one of the leading such councils in Germany. It has, for the last 5 years, I think it's been held an interfaith day, a day of religion in Frankfurt. In 2020, it wasn't held in person, but each faith group that was a member of the council, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, provided a short video addressing issues of religion and nature, and what religion and what their faith teaches them about treating and engaging and interacting with nature. I personally can tell you more about the Interfaith Festival that took place last year in Hanau, because that's where I attend church. I live just outside of Hanau. You can see me on the picture on the very left. I'm hiding behind the mayor, who is obviously underdressed for the occasion, and I'm overdressed, so we kind of balance each other out. But that was a heartwarming event. One of the things we did was to involve, because it was held on the schoolyard, and we asked high school students attending the school to read from Holy Scriptures from all the different faith groups involved. And we decided to have them not reference those quotes, not to tell the audience which holy books they were reading from. In our case, they read from the Doctrine and Covenants. Also, the Bible quotes were read from the Bible, from the Holy Quran, from the writings of Baha'u'llah. It was very inspiring, and there was a great feeling of camaraderie. I arrived quite early, and our board to set up our little tent pavilion, and we had a plan. Everyone knew where they were supposed to go, and I was addressed by my Muslim friends, who said, "Do you know if the Jewish folks are going to show up. Isn't that their spot? They had their assigned spot right next to us. And they decided to set up a tent for them. So when the Jewish congregation arrived, they already had everything set up for them. And afterwards asked me, Mr. Grünke, what do you happen to know who provided us with this tent? And we should talk about taking it down. And I told them, I think it was the Muslims who volunteered to set up the Jewish tent, just to give you a glimpse of the camaraderie and the sense of community crossing denominational and even faith borders. One of the outcomes of that interfaith festival in Hanau was this document that was created. It was, even with the correlation, it's an official church document and has the church logo and everything. This quotes passages of scripture from all four standard works of the church, each talking about creation and about our treatment of creation. And this I'm continuing to show you a chain of events. This very document was used during our first in-person meeting. The first meetings of the German chapter of Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship were all held online, for one, because of the pandemic, and then because the few members that we have are spread out all across the country. But this was distributed at this event. Our first in-person event was also an interfaith event. We invited our friends from the Baha'i. I don't know how many of you have Baha'i friends, wonderful people, and shared passages of scripture from the writing of Baha'u'llah and from the standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints about caring for the earth, caring for creation, and then had a very engaging discussion. It took quite a long time and afterwards. So we had a nice show up for a first time event. There were more than 20 people there. And this wasn't our first interfaith event. As a matter of fact, this happened because we had the idea because we were addressed by the Abrahamic Forum, an interfaith and national interfaith organization that brings together the Abrahamic religions. One of their projects is called Religions for Biodiversity. We had one of their officers give a presentation at a virtual meeting of Treuhandschaft für die Erde. And then one of the annual activities of Abrahamic Forum is their religious nature protection days. And they approached us and told us, we've had such wonderful experiences with you. We would highly appreciate if Treuhandschaft für die Erde could put together some kind of event, and we'll put it in our event calendar. So that's exactly what happened. Continuing, I'm returning back from Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship to the church in general, because looking into the future, I see some of our events maybe being linked with the church, with the official church itself. Currently, there aren't too many new meeting houses being built in Europe because the church does not experience noteworthy growth in Europe. In some parts, we are in decline as well, even though not as severely as the two largest churches. But on the left, you see the construction zone. This was taken the day of the groundbreaking of the Rammstein Chapel, or as our American friends would say, the Bamstein Chapel. It has a large military base. This will be the first building in Europe that will combine solar and geothermal to make the chapel nearly energy independent. And as the German chapter, we've already decided that we wanted to learn more about that project, maybe take a tour. At this point, there's not much to see, but that will change. And then on the right side on the photograph, this was taken, you can see the Dutch flag in Breda, Netherlands. And this will be a green roof chapel. You can already see it. They have plants growing on the roof, and you can see, I think it's a solar panel right there. And this will be interesting as well. I don't know if you're going to travel to the Netherlands to see about that, but we are delighted to see some creative and greener meeting houses developing in Europe. Now, if I showed this slide to our friends at Friends of the Earth or Green Faith, they may be a bit surprised because they may not even know that they're in contact with us. What I'm saying is several of our leadership team and at least one audience member, if I can tell, are active with Friends of the Earth, which is probably the most influential German environmentalist organization, combining traditional conservation projects with political lobbying. And Green Faith, and the German chapter of Green Faith, which is more political in nature than Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship defines itself to be, was just started a few months, I may even want to say weeks ago. I happen to be one of the founding members, and we do expect that there's going to be some synergy. Some of us who are heavily involved with Friends of the Earth have developed expertise in certain fields that will probably lead to events, to presentations, lectures, or maybe even service projects. And the same may result from our activities, from our relationship with Green Faith. That's really all I wanted to give you as a brief overview.
Thanks, Ralf. I think you're right about your accent. I think it is semi-American, semi-British, semi-something else. Should we say German or Austrian? Anyway, it was very good. Very nice accent. I have to tell you before I go any further that Ralf was actually in our living room some 30 years ago as a missionary, serving in the UK. Actually, I was living in England then. So it's nice to have the chance to share a forum with Ralf some 30 years later. And actually, I am in a living room, so it's almost the same environment. Well, welcome to Scotland. I'm afraid that you'll probably recognise I don't have a Scottish accent, and I'm not going to try and use a Scottish accent just in case there's somebody from Scotland listening, and I make a really bad job of it. But we have lived in Scotland for about 20 years, and what I want to do a little bit is just sort of share with you some of my reasons for getting into Earth Stewardship with the church as such, and how that developed in my own life. Now, something I wanted to tell you, just a really quick, not a story because this really happened. I look after a couple of country estates as part of a gardening business that I run, and one of these gardening businesses, they have quite rich owners, so they come and visit every now and again. And one particular day, the owner's children were running around on top of the wall in the main courtyard. Now, I was just walking out of the courtyard when one of them threw something, obviously at the other child, but it happened to bounce off the archway I was walking under and hit me on the head. Now, as the blood started to pour down my face, the owner sort of rushed out and started screaming at the children and screaming at her husband to go and get the car to take me to the hospital. I was okay, by the way. But anyway, as I saw all of this, I looked at one of the children, a little girl, and she seemed bereft. And I thought I need to sort of say something to her. So I looked at her and tried to be sort of very serious and said to her, well, don't worry. it's worse than it looks. Now, of course, what I meant to say is it's not as bad as it looks, or it could be worse. But I got things a little bit confused. Maybe it was the knock on the head. But actually, from being in a serious situation, the humour allowed us to share the experience. And I think sharing the experience is part of what I want to speak about today. Now, you can see the heading there is Perspectives from Scotland. These are partially perspectives from running an Earth Stewardship group, partially from my life, and partially from living in Scotland. Now, hopefully this will work. My face has been dancing around the screen at some stage earlier on when I was practicing this, so I'm hoping that it's not as bad as that. Okay, good. I was actually, I'm moving ahead of myself here. I was actually reminded by a church leader that I contacted recently, and I'm dancing around the screen there. So my apologies for dancing around the screen. I hope it makes the talk more entertaining. If you have a look at the screen there, I was actually reminded recently by a church leader in self-reliance and welfare that everything that we do as a church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is to help us to come unto Christ. And I suppose, how is the care of the earth about coming unto Christ? And for me, every aspect, and I'm sure you, of the gospel is about this, and helping everyone understand that earth stewardship's not just a hobby like football, or it's just about gardening, but it also means to understand and get closer to the Creator in a tangible way, sometimes peaceful, often all-encompassing, but it's a way that we too often fail to recognise as a testimony of Him. Whether we view creation as happening over periods of time, as Abraham described, or billions or 4.5 billion years, as the world explains it, creation is so spectacular, it's hard not to view it as divine. Now, let me just try and make this work more effectively. Yeah, there we go. Right, Gerald Corsey said, or Bishop Gerald Corsey said, of our interactions with nature, the emotions we feel kindle within us a deep sense of gratitude for Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. Now, here are my children, when a little bit younger. And when I think about nature, I think about, I suppose, my connection with my children and how that helps me recognise and actually love even more their earthly mother. When you look at those children, you can, some of you maybe remember running through tall grass, feeling the flowers, hearing the bees, the small flies, looking at the butterflies, and the excitement maybe of running towards horses. But we don't have to all live on a croft or a small holding or be a farmer to do that. That's obviously open to us all the time. But these sort of experiences connect us to nature. And I think they also connect us to each other because we all remember that sort of experience. And maybe this connection with nature and with creation and with our Creator helps us realise maybe there's a little bit more to being a Zion community than we thought. Now, my children have always known through experiences that they've had on our croft, which is a small holding, by the way, they've always known and had a testimony of Christ. of the creation. They know that it's a testing ground. They understand the pain and the sorrow that mortality brings and the sadness. But they also have felt and heard the indescribable beauty and the joy and the excitement that creation brings. And these truths of life, I think, spring from the Creator's hand and come not from being taught principle by us, but for them having experience, spending time and living a life around things that maybe sometimes we try too hard to remember the names of things scientifically. So I suppose looking at fields of clover or vetch or dandelion or buttercups, I think in this case, sometimes we're thinking, well, that's a nitrogen fixer, or maybe that's a mineral accumulator. Instead of thinking, actually, I'm beginning to understand the love of a divine creator, of Christ, through going through these places. Now, I think there is peace and hope in Christ, obviously through the atonement, through the atoning sacrifice, and through the gift of grace. But how many of us have felt the peace of walking amongst trees, contemplated our lives while gazing at the stars, and stood in awe and wonder as we realise there's somehow a greater hand in charge. In our frenetic, I suppose, sometimes absorbed lives, who has felt the embrace of the outdoors? I know I've been out there many times and have felt a real peace of somehow something that is greeting me without judgment, embracing me almost. And it gives us space, I think, to reflect and restores strength to our weary souls at times. Now, I could have placed here a really great picture of a tree, I suppose. There's a great scripture there that you can read on the screen. But this is actually a picture of an older tree with two sister missionaries pointing at it there. They've just planted it. It will be a beautiful tree. And eventually it will nitrogen fix and restore the soil to some sort of life from the barren, peaty type of soil that it is. But already life and experience have grown from its little small stem. I think it was Tolkien that sort of that the name of a tree didn't originally just mean a tree, like a label, but the sum of all those actions that happened around it. The sisters planted the tree, they dug the hole, they mulched it with cardboard and compost, they experienced the wind and the weather, working with our family, working with me, sadly. They remember the laughs, the dinner afterwards, the service, the love, the prayer of gratitude, and they'll remember and feel this again and again in the future. And from that, they'll remember this tree and that they helped, or how it helped, I suppose, make those experiences happen. Now, this is myself and my wife and two of my sons. And actually, this is slightly out of date because my daughter has just recently got sealed in the temple as well. But this is actually in the grounds of the Preston temple. So I wanted to just sort of show from this that each of us are on the covenant path. And in the temple, of course, we take out some of the most important covenants of our whole lives. And when we come out of the temple, we have the opportunity to be surrounded by the beautiful gardens. And it just, to me, it just sort of shows how, and for example, in the endowment itself, it is done within the framework of the creation. And now outside in the beautiful rose garden, we consider those covenants, and they're amongst, I don't know, the many beauties that are gifted to us in a physical way through the creation. So I'm going to show you where I live now. So don't tell anybody. But I live in the house in the centre there that is pink. Now it was chosen actually because it was pink by my wife. So our land is actually behind the pink house, and there's a lock called the Lock of May, which is just behind it. To the right, slightly out of picture, is the Castle of May, one of Prince Charles's and King Charles's castles now. On the other side of the lock, you can see some houses. Then there's the sea. It's the Pentland Firth, and then the North Sea and beyond, Orkney and the North Pole probably, even fairly soon afterwards. Well, it feels like that anyway. So this is where I sort of started my real relationship, I suppose, with the outdoors. Now, before this, as has been said, I used to work in an office. I worked in various offices on customer services and in training and management for about 20 years. And I was exhausted from that, and we needed to change. And actually, I am one of the individuals that has been helped by nature itself to cure me from my mental stress and exhaustion. So one of the things that I think that maybe we forget amongst all our trying to make things sustainable are actually the natural things that nature does for us. It can help our mental well-being. And there are things that I'm trying to suggest to some of our local leaders that we could do in our gardens to make them a little bit more amenable for us to actually spend time in. Even if we've not got to the stage of actually planting any trees or anything like that yet, they could still be places that we could spend time in. And even in the areas where there is very little garden space, there could be places where others could come and spend time as well. Now, this picture is in slight contrast. Actually, I've gone a little bit too far there, but I should show you this bit here. So this is in slight contrast. This is what our croft looked like when we first arrived, or our small holding looked like when we first arrived. Now, that is actually a cesspit, and most of the cesspit was actually on most of the yard. It had overflowed and it was everywhere. It also had pigs there. The place was fairly barren. I said quite peaty, very wet. We were told that we couldn't grow trees because we were so close to the North Sea. It was too windy. We couldn't grow herbs because it was too wet. But it makes me think about stewardship in a sense, because a lot of people will tell you as you try to grow your group, no, we can't. You can't do that. But I'd like to suggest that don't give up. There are lots of things that we can do. And so what we decided to do was grow trees, even though we're told we shouldn't. We put up some fences and we started to grow some trees, and then we grew a few more, and then we grew a few more. And there we've actually grown over 1,000 trees. So there are people that tell you that you can't do certain things, and they'll tell you that right way through your lives, I'm sure. But when it comes to earth stewardship, certainly in Scotland, it's a very new thing. I've only been here for 9 months doing this sort of thing. And there is still that feeling of, really, is this part of the gospel of Jesus Christ? Should we really be doing this? And there are quite a few barriers that we have to get over. But we can do it. Well, of course, we had the ducklings and ducks and chickens. We even had water buffaloes. We tried to fit in with the water, so we bought water buffaloes. This was a bit of a shock to the locals, who decided it was some sort of a cow, even though I tried to tell them it was a water buffalo. No, it's a cow. No, it's a water buffalo. But anyway, we persevered. This is our milking cow, so we used to milk cows. I might come back to her later on. Now, our family often used to look a little bit like this, a lot of the time. We had 5 children, or we've got 5 children, a little bit older now, but sometimes it was animals and children and everything was mixed together. But it was exciting, and I wouldn't have swapped it for anything. I hope they wouldn't either. So you can see this is some 15 years, 16 years on. We've grown trees that are 15 or 20 feet tall. We were told we couldn't grow on the wet land. So initially we made raised beds, and we grew vegetables in those raised beds. So again, you can do things. A lot of people will keep telling you, we've never done that before. You can't do that. Well, actually, yes, you can. So we need to relate these experiences to earth stewardship and running a group as well. So here we have those herbs that people told us we could never grow. So what we do is we actually created rooms with hedges to stop the wind, and then we created microsystems within them so that we could grow herbs in some areas, fruit trees in others, and then eventually we managed to grow a whole food forest. Grow fruit trees that are helped by the older trees that we've grown previously by giving them extra nitrogen. And we harvest them, or my son harvests the trees a little bit. Those herbs, we also like to make sure that we biodiversify. So we grow a lot of pollinators as well. These are marigolds. People told us we can't grow marigolds. Yes, we can grow marigolds. You can't grow herbs. So what we thought we would do is we would start a herb business. And with it, we grew herbs, and then we made soaps and skin balms from those herbs. So you can do things that people tell you we can't do. Wind is one of the greatest problems that we had. I've just gone past that again. Maybe I should. There you go. So wind was one of the worst problems that we have. Sometimes we'll get winds of 70, 80 miles an hour. Every now and again, they'll go up to 100 miles an hour. Very severe, very cold. So what we decided we would do is write a book, actually a children's book, about wind and the sound of the wind. And that'll just make a little bit of money to maybe balance things out. So this is one of the houses that I later went on to garden because of my experiences working on a croft. Again, I suppose this is a metaphor. You'll get into. I was actually up on top of a cherry picker there, taking trees out from the top of a tower, which actually dates back to the 17th, 18th century. Something I never thought I would do in my lifetime, but it's strange how the Lord directs your life, and I consider He's still doing that for me today. This is a house, another estate that I look after. We actually built a Japanese garden on that house. Is on the most northerly point, pretty much, of the whole of the UK. The wind is severe, and somehow we built a Japanese garden right there. So maybe I should just say a little bit about, I'm sure most of you are either involved in gardens, even however tiny or large they might be. If not, then join a gardening group. or give a gardening tour if you have a great garden, open your own garden up. Most people that I've ever met who go on these garden tours or get involved in any way are really happy to share their experience of gardening. And you can have great conversations about the environment and stewardship, and even get into church doctrine. People are very open. Once they're in a garden, it seems like they suddenly relax and the world's problems are off their shoulders. So yeah, I would definitely say do what you can in terms of sharing your garden or your gardening experience. There's another little gardening group that I shared with. Involve youth. Sometimes they're not immediately enthusiastic, but we are told that this is the rising generation, and it's really important that we involve the youth now. Maybe it's time, perhaps, as a group, as a whole, that we maybe start an Earth Stewardship Youth Forum. This is something we're going to try and do here in Scotland. Sometimes they do surprise you, and this is a group that I did a number of workshops at a young adult convention. This is a bit of a double-edged sword. I went to this young adult convention, did a lot of workshops there. The young adults are really, really concerned about the environment, but they don't know where to go. And sometimes they see groups, sometimes like ours, and they're overwhelmed with the science of it, and they don't feel they fit. And that's why I think it's important that we use sometimes common experiences and humour to draw people in and discuss these things. Yeah, I was going to say it was a double-edged sword, because I went here and I played football. And unfortunately, when I played football, I ruptured my hamstring, and actually my leg is still not cured after 4 months of having a ruptured hamstring and damaged nerves. But it was worth it, I think. But that was one of those things that happens. We got them to get involved with trees. I mean, everybody's talking about planting trees all around the world. I know they are. So we planted up some trees for them on our small holding. So we got them to write their names on little lollipop sticks there, and they have trees that we planted for them. And we said, okay, we'll do this for you, but please go away and plant something, even if it's just an indoor plant or a weed. Just please plant something. So, well, for 10 years or so, I'm sure my wife's not going to be very happy I've stopped it on that picture. But for 10 years or more, we've been cleaning beaches across the north of Scotland where we are. For me, it's one of the wonderful aspects of working in the environment and doing something of service. So I spend a lot of time just walking up and down by the sea, and it's really difficult. It's hard. No, it's wonderful. But we're picking up plastic off these beaches. I think it's really, really important that as a group, if you're starting a group, sometimes we are well spaced out. And something that we're going to be doing, we've already joined a local group called Caithness Beach Cleans. So what they do is they pick up bits of plastic actually from beaches, but also other areas as well. And then they weigh it and they say, well, this is what we've taken off beaches in Caithness as a whole. So if you want a project maybe that would encompass your whole country or whole area or whatever it might be, then something you can do, and we're going to be doing, is actually as individuals in our little areas, sometimes we'll come together as a group, we can take plastic from wherever it might be, on the side of a river or on a beach, or a park or a lake, and weigh it. And then we can take in just how much as a group we are doing to help. So we can say, well, we've taken 1,000 pounds of plastic off beaches as a Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship group this year, which I think will be tremendous. So that is something that can help you, I think, join each other together. A little project like that. Yeah, now I wanted to just say a little bit about, in closing, I suppose, some of the objections you're likely to get, like, we've never done that before. I think I've had that. I mean, I've been a member of the church nearly 40 years now, and I think in many of the meetings I've been to, there's always somebody that seems to say, we've never done it like that before. Well, actually, maybe we can try this, because what you've been doing, has that worked? Well, not entirely, but we've never done that. Yeah, well, let's try and do that, shall we? So Bishop Corzay has said, the presiding bishopric have said, the church members I represent are asking. So if we want to change from this, we've never done that before, there's always a because. Could we work another way? Could we take the burden from our bishop and relief society presidents and elders quorum presidents, and have environmental specialists called? Normally, often you hear this, normally. So normally is not a definitive. So if I was to say, normally I have one head, that would be pretty strange. So normally is not a definitive, because circumstances are no longer normal. Around 20% of the world's children and adolescents have mental health conditions. Mental health is improved by spending time in nature. Walking in forests, for example, forest bathing has scientifically been proven to improve our mental health. Typically, there's another word. Typically, I would have 5 children. No, it's not typically I would have 5 children. I've always got 5 children. Typically, try and ignore it and use it because. Okay, typically we might have done that, but because we are now more aware of the effects of climate change, could we now recycle more and save energy at church? I think we could. Usually, well, I've just lost my place again there. Hold on. I lost my flow. It was flowing so well there. So typically, we would not, because we're now more aware of the effects of climate change. Could we now recycle? Well, yes, we could. Usually I have 2 hands. No, I've always got 2 hands. Usually is not a definitive. So somebody says to you, usually we don't do that. Well, usually is not always. We are facing unusual environmental circumstances because we are now more aware of the need to be sustainable. Can we do something different? Sharon Eubank came to this forum, I believe, twice. The second time she came right at the end, she said something that I thought was quite interesting and I think really important. She said, help us understand our doctrine. The doctrine that we have is beautiful. And it really explains why it's so important to come unto Christ also means being good earth stewards. She said, show the great love we have for the earth is in our doctrine. We need to share our doctrine with individuals. I've spoken to young adults recently who didn't even understand and realize that trees, for example, had a soul. Pearl of Great Price talks about it beautifully. She said, make our actions match our doctrines. Share with others, not in a scolding way or impassioned or obsessive way. Okay, that doesn't lead anything into interpretation, but I think it's really important that we don't become too obsessive and that we're easy to approach and that we share our ordinary experiences that others can recognize and not just share scientific knowledge, but share real experiences that we've had that have drawn us close to nature itself. And then she said, encourage others in a kind, loving, humorous way to be better connected. Not necessarily to be just better connected to the environment, but to be better connected to each other. And that is one of the glories, I think, of the environment, that it can connect us together. As I've said, it can help us become a Zion community. Now, I haven't got very much more to say other than that for now, but I did. Do I have much time left? Because I'm aware that I've gone on for some time. How are we for time?
We should probably be ending soon.
Okay. So I was going to tell you a funny story about a cow. That cow at the end there is called Flo. And there is a funny story which involves her sitting down in front of a bus in the middle of the road, and all the passengers got out. And yeah, eventually the only way I could actually get her to leave the vicinity was show her that there was some grass at the side of the road. And then she promptly fell in the ditch which was at the side of the road. She said she felt she couldn't get to home. She couldn't get to home. It was too difficult. She suddenly spotted home. She leapt out of the ditch and skipped in. But I'll tell you that another day. I wanted to say, I think as a group leader, I've had some amazing experiences running Earth Stewardship. But I think my best experiences of Earth Stewardship have always been with other people, sharing experiences, funny stories, sometimes funny pictures of people caring for creation. So maybe at some stage in the future, maybe because Ralf writes books and I write books, maybe we should bring together some funny stories and poems and pictures and release it from the Latter-day Saints Earth Stewardship and encourage others to come and do the work along with us. Thank you.